Hi drummers, hope you're well. Right, quick talky one for you today. I'll try and keep this as brief and to the point as I can. Shout out to channel member Simon who asked this and loads of other people who ask it, and it's one of the questions I get asked most often, in fact. That is, what are drum grades and should I study them? Is it worth studying them? Some variation on that question. Well, drum grades in the UK anyway are a level by level system for learning the drums that may or may not include taking the exam. There's no it's not compulsory to take the exam at every level, or any level in fact, but they're a level by level system. Typically it goes from grade 1, which is the lowest, to grade 8, which is the highest. You've also, for most syllabuses, got something before grade 1, typically called debut or initial. So the big sort of principle for me that they're based on is the idea that if you start playing the drums from the beginning, you start at the beginning and you learn a basic set of skills, like in the initial level, get you off the ground, get you playing the basics, get you sort of moving on the drums. And then from then on, what they do is they ensure that for every time you go to learn something new, it's at that level where it's just a little bit of a challenge for you. I like to think about it as the improvement zone. This is something I talk about a lot in these videos. I'm a big fan of this, just from my own learning of the drums, honestly. The idea that when you come to learn something new, a song or a sticking pattern or an exercise, whatever it is, it's just in that zone where you can just about do it, but it's a little bit of a challenge based on where you're at. And actually over time, one of the coolest things about drum grades for me is if you stay in that particular zone, you're always moving forward really, really nicely. You're always getting enough of a challenge to progress, but not too much that it's disheartening. And man, you stay on it forever like that, improving and improving, moving through the grades. Now, as you can probably tell, generally speaking, I'm quite a big fan of these. They're definitely not the only way to learn the drums or any instrument, but I am a big fan of them on the whole for most people. The question of whether you should study them or not basically comes down to answering the question, like, what do I want out of this thing, honestly? And it might sound a bit heavy at the start, but honestly, my experience is a lot of people don't really know, and this is where it all gets a bit vague and all a bit woolly. If you can answer this question at the start, you're good as far as I'm concerned. So if you're, the question is, what do you want out of this thing? What's your best answer to that question at the minute? If you're the sort of person who's sitting at the drums saying, okay, I just want to sort of have a bit of fun here, enjoy this. I'm not really going to get too deeply into it. I'm just going to play a few basic beats, jam along with some songs, but I've got a load of other things going on in my life. Then totally cool. I would say at that point, drum grades are probably not for you. Just do that. Just enjoy yourself. The one thing I'd say about making that decision is, please remember, this is where it gets a bit messy for some people. If you're saying that, that's cool, but you are then making a decision. So then honestly, that's it. You're going to be able to jam along with some songs, and lovely, good luck to you, that's awesome. But then you can't complain when you can't play Rosanna, do you know what I mean? Or you can't say, oh, this really tricky bit from this really difficult song, oh, I don't know why I can't get that. Well, you can't get that because you haven't built your skills level by level up to the point where you can do it, do you know what I mean? So that's totally cool. If your attitude is generally, oh yeah, I just want to enjoy this thing, have a bit of fun, not worried about spending tons of time on it, I've got loads of other things going on in my life, just want to jam and have a bit of fun with my mates, whatever, along to some music, brilliant, then drum grades are definitely not for you. On the other hand, if you're someone who's got a bit of time to work on this thing and you're going to take it somewhat seriously, by somewhat seriously I would say you're going to maybe have regular lessons, not necessarily, but maybe have regular lessons every week or every couple of weeks, or once a month or something like that. And you're going to do regular practice. So a decent amount of time. My little guideline rule you might have heard me say before is, I think of it as maybe a minimum is about 10 minutes per day multiplied by the grade that you're doing. So when you're starting out, but 10 minutes a day to get you started is fine. If you're going to do that over a sustained period of time, I would say yes, that'd be a really worthwhile thing to do. If you're going to keep that going, like I said, over a sustained period, that would definitely be a good idea. Or another way of saying that is, if you're at the point where you'd kind of say, I'm a drummer, like I'm learning the drums. If you would say that, in your heart, you genuinely believe that that's the case, I'm working on this thing. This is not necessarily that you're going to turn professional or get super serious with it, but it's like one of the main things that you're doing with your time. It doesn't have to be the main thing, but one of the main things. Then yes, I would recommend drum grades at that point. Again, just to be super clear, they're not the only way to learn, but they are one brilliant way to do it. Again, what they give you is that lovely structure, like one level at a time. Load of other pros. I'll do a quick pros and cons list, actually, because I wrote a few things down. First pro I wrote down that popped into my head was exactly that, structure, right? So if you're going to go about playing the drums, presumably you're wanting to get as good as possible in as short amount of time as possible. That makes sense. I certainly was when I started, and I certainly am with anything that I start doing. So they definitely give you that, in my opinion. They give you the structure to do that. So there's no doubt about what you're going to do. You're studying, this first book of songs. Like I say, especially if you do Trinity. So I'm most familiar with Trinity Rock and Pop, Trinity College London Drum Kit, and Rock School, all of which are brilliant, by the way. I've made videos comparing those, but all of which are great, and you will get good at playing the drums if you learn them. Especially with Trinity, what you get is these amazing books before grade 1 even. So this is Introducing Drum Kit, part 1, 2, 3 by George Double. Absolutely love those. So you start off with those. They got musical examples. They get you straight away. There's some structure. You sit down. There's no doubt about what you're going to do. It's not like, oh, what do I play today? Like, it's there for you, man. Obviously, if you've got a drum teacher or you're a channel member of this channel or whatever, I'll write out a practice plan, and some of it will be that. There'll be lots of other things as well around that. But it does straight away give you structure. And then as you go on to grade 0, grade 1, and you start learning songs, and the drum, almost all the drum grade syllabuses these days are hugely based around just playing songs. That's all it is, learning music. People say, oh, I don't want to do drum grades. Well, you don't want to learn songs then? That's basically all it is learning songs these days. They've made it, all of the syllabuses are really cool now and as accessible as possible. So it gives you that structure. You know what you're doing. You start at the beginning, and then you go onto the next level. A whole load of cool songs at the initial grade, whole load of cool songs at grade 1. You know exactly what you're going to practice. There's no doubt about that. It gives you that. Another one is clear goals, right? Kind of along the same lines. But again, there's no doubt about what we're aiming for. Whether you're taking the exam or not is completely up to you. But there's no doubt that when you first start playing, you were looking to hit the initial grade level at a good level. And then you can say, cool, either your teacher or maybe if you go and do an exam, another professional will say, yeah, cool, this, you're sounding good at this level. I see and hear these skills happening at this level. On you go to the next level. So it gives you that clear goal, clear sense of direction. It also gives you a really good grounding in a wide range of music, right? A wide range of styles. This depends a little bit on the syllabus that you do. If you do Trinity Rock and Pop, for example, as the name suggests, that's largely based around rock and pop songs, but still a wide variety of music, still a great wide variety of music. The one thing that all the best musos have in common, as far as I'm concerned, is they all have a wealth of experience in different styles of music. So I was watching the great Rick Beato interview with Sting and Dominic Miller last night, and they were talking about when Dominic Miller first went on audition with Sting. And they were like, oh, what did you jam on? I think they just said, oh, we jammed on like Ain't No Sunshine, And it's like, Dominic Miller was like, oh yeah, I'm a muso. Like, it was fine. It was, I knew that. So the point is you get a ground, like all great musicians, you get a grounding in loads of different music, right? And the coolest thing about the grades is someone who has been thinking about it, longer than a beginner has put that whole course together for you, right? You're going to study this set of songs, then this set of songs, then this set of songs, and it's laid out for you one at a time. So that's a really, really good thing, a grounding in a wide style of music. If you go for these grades, as opposed to Trinity Rock and Pop or Rock School, if you go for the Trinity College London drum grades, which I'd consider these the gold standard. They're all excellent, man, but I would consider this grade book probably the gold standard in drum kit. You really, really do get a wide variety of musical styles, so jazz and musical theatre and, pop and rock and reggae and soul music and Motown and everything else under this, Latin music, everything else as well. So you really do in that case. But whatever course you follow, you get a really, really good grounding, and the result of which is at the end, I would say there would be very few holes in your musical understanding. Or if someone said, "Oh yeah, it sounds like this tune," you'd be like, "Oh yeah, cool." Like you've got that. You've covered a really good wide range of music up to that point and got that like in your blood, so to speak, as a musician. And then the other pro I wrote down just off the top of my head just now was challenge, right? So one of the coolest things, in fact, about studying grades is you're always getting a bit of a challenge. Now, my experience of people who don't follow much of a structured course is they don't do this, and this is just human nature. I think very often when we just do, I don't know, we sit down at the instrument and play whatever occurs to us, practice whatever occurs to us, rather than something that's sort of structured like that. Is sometimes we end up defaulting, or quite a lot actually in my experience, we end up defaulting to things we can already do, only things that we sort of already like. Anyway, from my own experience, we can get quite insular with it, quite kind of based around the things that, like I say, we can already do ourselves and we already like. And what this does is it takes us a little bit out of the comfort zone, not wildly, because, like if we're at grade 4, for example, none of the songs are going to be wildly out of nowhere or suddenly way more difficult. There's a little bit of variety. But basically, there's a little bit of challenge. The idea is if you've come through grade 3, for example, and you've done well there, and those skills are solid, you go to grade 4, everything is just a little bit of a challenge, but hopefully not too horrendous at that point. With work, with a bit of dedication over a few months, I guess, you'll be able to get from where you stand, good performance at grade 3 to grade 4, sounding good. So that's a really good thing. Also, within the pieces themselves, there's always like one or two moments that are like a little bit more tricky, and there the challenge is, okay, am I going to take this bit out? Am I going to work on it? The result of doing that is always like a development of skill, a development of something new. You've challenged your brain to do something new. And I'm a huge fan of it in that way. So I'd say the big pros for doing it, provided that you have the time and you have that drive and you have that desire for drumming to be something significant, something relatively serious in your life, are structure, clear goals, a grounding in a wide variety of material, and challenge. And the big thing with all of those, I'd say, is it's in the most efficient way as well. Going back to the idea of getting the most sort of learning and value as you can in a short amount of time. People have, like I said earlier, really people who've put this course together have been thinking about it longer than beginners have. So it's people who know what they're talking about have put it together, and it's as really efficient as efficient as possible, as I see it, route through all that stuff. Can you learn all that stuff without doing grades? Yes. It will probably take you longer, in my experience, and it will certainly be a bit more haphazard, and you might get all of it, but you probably won't, honestly. So best advice I can give is, if you are in a position where you're saying, yeah, I'm a drummer, I'm learning the drums, this is one of the things in my life, doesn't have to be the main thing, but one of the things, then I would massively recommend it. The cons list, by the way, I genuinely couldn't think of anything. Like, what are the cons of getting good at playing the drums? Like, people, I mean, the cons that sometimes people put forward, let's dispel a few myths. This is idea that if you learn drum grades, like, you won't be creative in some way. It's absolute bollocks, man. I've got to tell you, like, I'll tell this out of love and respect for you. It's absolutely nonsense. But so what? Because you've learned some songs, you're now not able to be creative. That's the biggest load of nonsense I've ever heard, mate. By taking in songs, by consuming great quality material, you're only more informed to then make your own creative decisions, as far as I'm concerned. So that one's nonsense. The other possible con some people put forward is, it takes time. And I feel like, well, I dealt with that in the first place, because if you genuinely don't have time, well, that's cool. Like, don't do it. Don't tease yourself, because normally what happens is, if people start, like, embark on the grades and they don't really have time to do it, that is quickly apparent. And actually, that perhaps the time they do spend on it, getting to the first or second grade or whatever, is that, ends up sort of not being, is wasted anyway, isn't it? And typically that really becomes clear if a drummer gets to, I would say, grades 3, 4, 5, 6, the middle grades. If their heart isn't there, or if the time just isn't there to do it, it quickly becomes apparent, and that's when it starts being a negative experience. Some people say that I don't want the pressure of doing exams. I mean, fair enough. Like, the good thing about drums is it's drums, man. Like, Ralph Salvin's, legendary Ralph Salvin's always says, I read this a few times from him, we're not flying a plane here, we're not saving lives. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if you don't have to do the exam, if you want to, cool. On balance, I'd recommend that you do an exam every now and again to get that objective feedback that you're on the right track. But generally, like, so what, man? Like, if you don't do an exam, no big deal. So if you take that away, like, so what? Who cares how long it takes you to get through it? No big deal, no pressure, that's fine. If you really get to a point where you don't like it anymore, well, that's all right. Stop. Like, again, like, no, this is drums, man. Do you know what I mean? It's rock and roll. Like, it's not going to save your life. So I don't think that's a big deal. I never force people through it. I will encourage people, if they've got to a certain point with it and they've put in like a ton of effort and time up to that point, and if sometimes people then say, I'm going to give up, I do kind of say to give up. I will gently and in a encouraging way give people a push through the level that they're at that point, because you think, oh, come on, man, like, you've got this far, you might as well stick with it. So, quick recap. Should I study drum grades? Well, depends what you want out of this thing. If you just want to have fun, you haven't got a huge amount of time, you just want to jam on the kit, and you're not going to practice regularly, no, definitely not. If you do have time to play, you're going to practice reasonably regularly. It doesn't need to be hours a day, but 10 minutes times by the grade level or more, then yes, brilliant. I would totally recommend it there as the most efficient way to learn when you're getting started and progressing. It gives you a grounding in loads of different styles of music, theory, a reading. Should have said this. Obviously, if you want to read music, it's all in there as well. Things like creativity. People sometimes suggest the idea that if you're learning to read music and you're learning songs, like, I don't want to just repeat what other people did, I just want to be creative. That's nonsense. You don't choose between those things, man. Like, great writers, it's not that they say, I don't read stories because I just write my own. It's just nonsense. Obviously, by reading the classics, you're more informed, more inspired, and more educated to then make your own creative decisions, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, provided that you've got time and inclination, and you really want to say, I'm a drummer, then I would really, really recommend it. I can't repeat this enough times because people always come back with this. Is it the only way to do it? No. Is it the only way to get good at the drums? No. Can you learn all those things by not doing drums? Yes, but not as efficiently in my experience. I've taught thousands of people over lots of years, and my strong opinion at this point is it is the most efficient route through learning. So there we are. I hope that all makes a bit of sense. Shout out to Simon for asking that great question. And any questions about that or anything else I can help with, give us a shout anytime. See you soon.